Hello, Zeynep.
Now, this is the energy that we want to see in Privacy Village. Thank you, Ebru. Kim, thank you so much for popping in. Your presence here really elevated the whole spirit. Rebecca, as the guardian,
Yeah, thank you.
you did like 10x what I was like humbly asked you to come and take the responsibility for. And together with Zeynep, you're creating wonders here at the House of Responsible AI. All thanks to, again, our sponsors who's powering this stones, this epic place. VerifyWise, our friends at VerifyWise, and Görkem. Are you here? I'd like to introduce you to Kim. By the way, Kim, Görkem is leading VerifyWise, which I'm also helping build world's first open source AI governance framework, democratizing both the legal aspect and also having like an integrated libraries of libraries from Harvard, uh, Microsoft, these fairness toolkits, and ML libraries in GitHub. So like think of it like a interoperable, integrated AI governance, all free and open source. So I think you
about VerifyWise. So I've been in an IT domain for the last 30 years or so. And previously, I've been working in several enterprises. I've done my own company, built my own company, and then later on, I sold it. And last year, I founded Blue Wave Labs, a software development house in Canada with more than 30 developers. What we do is we build open source software, and one of the major applications that we build is VerifyWise, which is an open source AI governance platform, where we started with the EU AI Act, and we'll be adding more and more acts and regulations by time. So in a nutshell, that is what we are doing with VerifyWise. And thanks, Mertcan, for giving me the microphone.
Thank you so much, Görkem. So, in my own words, like in 3 sentences, Görkem and I met like 3 years ago when I was like founded Verilogy, the first years of my first privacy tech startup. And he was like kind of mentors who I was talking to. But he is humble, so he didn't go into much detail, but he's one of the top 3 people I know of regarding the FOSS movement, the open source movement in Turkey, because they are the first guys who built a privacy by design alternative to Google Analytics with Countly, which they sold to IBM, NASA, etc., as an open source tool. So that's why I was really excited to be part of Görkem's journey. While when he asked me to become like this legal AI governance slash privacy engineer, product manager, and I help him design all the tool and the controls lists, which is again a big challenge for me as well, but that's where the great learning comes from. And during the festival, we're going to be talking much more about this open source frameworks around AI governance and responsible AI that we at VerifyWise are designing. So
regulations around the world, as you know, they are popping up almost every day. A lot of districts, companies, organizations, countries, they are following up with the on a basis of EU AI Act, including but not limited to company-wide information that is not supposed to be staying on a software as a service platform, but rather on premises. Okay, so we are democratizing AI governance with our platform, with the hope that not only AI governance people, but also auditors, lawyers, software development companies would be able to contribute to it.
For being here, and you were here last year. You were one of the first privacy engineers like Kim Voits who joined the bandwagon of this creative privacy movement. And as of last year, you're on the advisory board, and now you're in the second time having a fireside chat. And like now we're even doing this mini boot camp rather than a fireside chat. So I'm gonna send last year's video for those who have missed, with Rebecca and I talk AI red teaming, privacy engineering, and lots more. It was like a 60-minute long session. And today, she was kind enough to bring her experience and wisdom from Google's privacy engineering practices all the way back to her Carnegie Mellon privacy engineering days in the academia. So she's, I think, one of the few people who deserve to call herself privacy engineer. And we are, as privacy villagers, very much honored to host you as the guardian of this sacred house, dear Rebecca. So the stage is yours. Please, yeah, take it on.
Yeah, thank you. So excellent. So I think what we'll do is there's definitely some points. So I have slides. Hopefully the visuals are fun. There's one or two cute cats, so it's worth it. So today is kind of just a story time where we're going to go through some true stories of privacy mistakes that companies have made. And you've already said my name. If you want to reach out to me, here's my email address, here's my website, feel free. I've written in detail about all of these cases more on my blog. So if you want like resources and links, you can find it on privacyengineer.ch/blog. So basically the idea here is like, what are privacy failures and what can we understand by looking at real life mistakes that companies have made? So what is a privacy failure? I mean, failure is a pretty big word. What do you like? If you had a different word for it, what would you use, or what are some examples that you know of privacy failures?
Ebru?
Rebecca, I haven't got any deep knowledge about the privacy, but I want to raise my hand and define my thoughts. It gets me privacy failure when you don't suit the rules of the privacy. Then you would be a failure of privacy. I think this is the simple what I think.
Mm-hmm. You don't follow the rules. You
Yes.
break a privacy law.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Any other thoughts?
Hi, Rebecca. My opinion is or private life maybe to another people maybe.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't really have an answer to the question, like, what is a privacy failure? I just wanted to put out some other words, like maybe people consider a data leak when information is leaked out, or a breach to be a privacy failure. Maybe people don't like the word failure, they just use the word incident, or maybe it's a violation, or maybe it's an unlawful act. What I'm looking at here specifically are things that have been in the news that were about privacy and embarrassed the company. And it probably cost them a little bit of money, probably cost them some revenue, probably cost them some legal fees, and at least like it didn't really look good for their reputation. So it's sort of a loose definition of failure. I mean, the company didn't fail, they're still all around, but yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask another question, given this sort of loose definition of maybe a data breach or maybe kind of an embarrassing privacy incident. Can you think of any companies that have had a privacy failure? And I would I would suggest typing it in the chat, because there may be companies that are like maybe like Turkish that I'm not aware of, or maybe there are some that are like so famous we've all heard of it. So feel free to just like write some companies that you can think of that have had some sort of Clearview, Meta, those are pretty famous. Yeah, internationally known. Sephora, oh, that's interesting. I don't know about the Sephora one. DoorDash, okay. Okay, I like Gorkam's answer. Like, all of them. If they're a big company, they have at least one. Cambridge Analytica, yes, that's a big one. Yep. Yeah. So, yes, cool. So the three that I'm going to talk about today, I think no one brought up. It's Uber, 23andMe, and Slack. And we're roughly going to go in chronological order. And I particularly like these stories because they're all still relevant today, right? Like the lessons learned, you could still apply as a privacy professional to like your company, even today. Yes, and I didn't work at any of these companies, and everything I know is based on sort of reading the news, reading their privacy policy, reading any like tech analyses, trying to read their security blogs, and basically trying to get as much information, but from the outside. And I guess the other thing I should say is like, even though I'm criticizing these companies and saying it's a failure, I'm not like necessarily trying to attack any privacy engineer or worker at those companies because, it's a hard job and things sometimes go sideways. So it's more meant to be like, what can we learn from these cases and not like, they were so bad. So, yeah. So let's start with Uber. And this one is all the way back in January 2017. And so what happened? Basically, people wanted to delete their Uber accounts. Oh, wait, did I just share the wrong thing? No,
We're looking at Uber January 2017. People wanted to
Okay.
delete their accounts.
Okay, I'm just like quickly trying to change my screen so I can see my slides and the chat at the same time. But so what was happening in Uber? And for all of these, I have to give a little bit of background of like what was happening in the world and why did people care about the things that they cared about. So back in January 2017 in the US, there were some troubling political issues going on. So Trump had just been sworn in for the first time, and one of his first acts was to impose a travel ban on people from certain countries. And it was largely Muslim countries, and it was largely perceived as being a like racist or like not a particularly cool thing to do or not like representing American values for a lot of Americans such as myself. So what the heck does this have to do with Uber? Well, what happened was people were like, the travel ban went into effect when people were on planes and they would arrive and find that they had no legal representation. They were being interrogated at the airport, and it was basically a bad situation. And a lot of taxi drivers decided to strike. So they said, we're not going to pick people up at the airport because of this travel ban. What does this have to do with Uber? Uber's CEO went on Twitter and said, we're breaking that strike. Uber drivers will pick you up and we're not even going to charge you more. So it's a complicated mess, but this made a lot of people angry. They weren't very happy with this act by Uber to say they were going to break the strike. So it created a bit of a Twitter storm, and the hashtag was delete Uber. And within a few weeks, over 200,000 people requested that their Uber account be deleted. So this is clearly a privacy thing because the ability to control your data, to delete your data is a privacy issue. So how did this end up like even more in the news? What went wrong even more than that, than just having a bunch of people want to like leave your platform and leave your product? Well, Uber did not have automated account deletion. So I wasn't there, but I'm picturing these Uber engineers like getting how many requests per minute or per second and trying to write like a SQL query on the fly that would delete that user's account. But there's always complicated things when it goes into deleting users' accounts. And there's always things that like you should probably think about ahead of time. So for example, with Uber, if I requested to delete my account, what does that mean for the ratings that I had given drivers? Should my rating be deleted from the driver's average? Like, is that the driver's data? Is it my data? So there's things you need to figure out. And as a company, you need to talk about when you're thinking about account deletion.
Rebecca,
Yeah.
can I jump in? Like a couple
Yeah.
of words?
Mhm.
So here I think, again, we need to emphasize privacy by design once more, both for responsible AI and also data protection compliance. And I remember two separate Pepper occasions which I joined virtually, that Uber privacy engineers were on stage and trying to like glorify how they built their data mapping systems with ML models and how they tag data inventories, etc. And I think it's all part of the pipeline, right? So in order to, you need to map it, you need to know where it is, then you need to have the systems to delete all those reviews, just like you said, all the way to like the user records. So yeah, I think again it comes to like if Uber was built with these in mind, we wouldn't have two pepper sessions around this, and you're not talking about this data breach, perhaps. So
Yeah. I mean, and to be fair, like Uber is definitely a different company than 2017. And that like CEO who's like getting involved in this political stuff, he's no longer the CEO of Uber and like left for many reasons. And like, I think generally agreed that he was kind of like a toxic CEO, which I'll come back to. But yeah, I mean, and so Uber has done a lot of really interesting privacy things. Why didn't they build automated account deletion? I mean, I don't know. They just chose not to. They didn't design it because they were technologically advanced enough to delete data, because at the same time they were putting autonomous vehicles on the streets of Pittsburgh, where I lived at that time, and also in Arizona. So it wasn't a question of ability, right? Like it's a question of planning or willingness or prioritization or privacy by design. So that's a really quick overview of the story. I will say that since it took the Uber so long to delete the accounts, more people were going back to Twitter and complaining that Uber wasn't respecting their deletion. And so then the Twitter storm grew even bigger. And eventually they did automate it. Like, I don't think they did all 200,000 deletions by hand. And so eventually they had to fix it. But this is definitely one of those things where, like, maybe if they'd built it earlier, they could have prevented some of the fallout. So from your perspective as privacy responsible AI folks, like Mert already mentioned privacy by design, but like from your perspective, what were some causes of the incidents, or what are some like maybe lessons learned that we could take from this story?
Kübra Durmuş, are you here? Say hi to Rebecca, please. And if you have your camera on, I would really appreciate that as well. Can you answer this question?
Thanks a lot, and it is my pleasure to meet with you, Rebecca. Thanks for your presentation also. Find the exact solution when the data breach happens. So you need to perceive all the rules at the beginning, and then you need to design all your systems according to privacy rules. Because when the data subject requested for deletion of their data, probably they couldn't answer this request as soon as possible because it took time to set up the system and find all their data, especially when we're talking about such a big systems as Uber. So this is a thing that should have been taken into account at the beginning.
In defense of Uber, like 2017 was pre-GDPR. So this is 2000. GDPR, I think, went into effect in late 2018.
May
So-
2018.
Yeah, but how about directive? I cannot exactly know what were the rights of data subjects in the directive, but I think it still might be possible for Uber to foresee this.
Good lawyer answer, Kübra. Congrats.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I think they were just sort of like, oh, if it happens or if we get so few of them, we just don't have to automate it, right? Like we can do it. It's just a little bit of work. It only takes 5 to 10 minutes to write that query and delete it, probably.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's my guess of what the thinking was, because I've seen that happen in other companies where like it just, you can do it by hand. So is it worth building the automated feature? And I think it is.
I think again, it's
Right,
it's definitely just like how privacy is always relevant to the context. I think it's really relevant if we're talking about a mini SaaS app who does like calendar for you. It would be quite different from 23andMe and your genetic information being processed. So therefore, I think again, privacy by design is the approach, because like you said, Rebecca, if you're e-commerce, even like a scale-up e-commerce, you get like 1,000 of DSRs per month, right? If you're like somewhere bigger, it would might like 5,000. But if you're Uber, I think the problem happens, you can't manually write those SQL things to make the DSR request honored. However, when you got 100,000, that's where like the problem starts to occur, the scalability of the DSR. That's why baking it in the left in the life cycle is really important. And I'm seeing Kim here, so hello, Kim. How are you? And Görkem said, automated account deletion feature can only be valid for minimum viable products. All other options, including all SaaS services, need a way to implement this without talking to sales customer success team. Definitely. There's got to be like a trust center and automated self-serve plug and play desired pipeline for sure. Kim is not here perhaps, so Rebecca, the stage is yours.
Hi.
Hey, hi.
Yeah, I am here, but I'm in the car. I was just joining to listen in, but
Drive safe.
Yeah.
All right.
We're glad you're here. So I'll keep going. I guess Kim, you can't see the slides, but that's okay. We can talk through most of it. So in my humble opinion, what are the three main causes of this incident? So I already mentioned, in case you don't know the acronym, IMHO, in my humble opinion, I think they had a pretty toxic CEO at this time. And obviously a privacy engineer can't control that, or a privacy professional lawyer can't control like your CEO going and saying dumb things on Twitter, but like you, or X, but you have to be prepared for it, right? Like you kind of have to build in all the automations for these sorts of like weird things that could happen, or maybe you can't be prepared, but like it happens. Also the fact that they had not automated the data deletion, and then also this issue of user control and transparency, where they couldn't go back to the users and tell them, well, we're working on deleting your account, but it's going to take a while. So in my opinion, like if I were to sort of boil this down to three root causes, I would say here are the three things. What can you learn? Like consider automating consider automating data deletion and thinking through user control and transparency. You always have to do that. So I'm going to move on to the next case, 23andMe. I already mentioned, this is genetic data. And so what happened? October 2023, there was some genetic data from 23andMe leaked onto the dark web. And again, this is story time. I'm going to start by putting this story into context. And I have no intention to take a political stance on anything here, but I think we can all agree that October 2023 was a like incredibly violent and troubling month, and the start of a lot of violence against civilians. And in particular, on I think it was October 6th or October 7th, a lot of Jewish civilians were targeted for being Jewish, right? So this is a context we need to have the very first week of October to understand how it must have felt to realize that there were leaked genetic data sets specifically targeting Jewish people, like specifically calling out Ashkenazi Jews, also specifically calling out Chinese and Chinese Americans, right? So there's already a sense of fear, culture of fear that you may be targeted, and then you realize it's worse. Your genetic data was breached, right? So it's like, I'm already feeling bad for the victims of this data breach, just for being in the data breach, but also just sort of the context of this. But what happened? I was angry by 23andMe's response, because they blame the victims. And I'm going to quote to you what they said, and then I'm going to tell you why it wasn't fair, it wasn't right, like it wasn't appropriate, in my humble opinion, right? This is all my opinion. So basically 23andMe blamed recycled passwords. And what they said was, unauthorized actors managed to access certain user accounts in instances where users recycled their own login credentials. So basically what they're saying is like users reuse their passwords. They used a bad password with some other website and it got leaked. And then because they also used that password on 23andMe, the bad actors were able to log into those accounts. So it's like their own fault, right? They used bad passwords, they reused it, nothing we can do. And they even said the users negligently recycled and failed to update their passwords following these past security incidents, which are unrelated to 23andMe. Again, I found this initial response a little bit tone deaf, in my opinion. And also, like, why? Okay, so let's look at the facts. They did have optional two-factor authentication. So the users didn't have to rely only on passwords, right? They made two-factor authentication opt-in. So, if a user really cared about their privacy or security, they could have opted into two-factor authentication. But it doesn't really explain how almost 6 million accounts were leaked. And what I'm showing here is a bar chart with like the reasons that different accounts were leaked. And so we're saying 6 million total. On the left, you see this number 14,000. There's actually a bar there. The bar is so small that you can't see it. Those are the users who actually had bad passwords, whose passwords were reused. All the other users here did not have, or like, we don't know if their passwords were good or bad, but they weren't part of previously known incidents. How did this happen? So 23andMe allows user-to-user sharing. And the idea here is like, you want to be able to find your long lost cousin, or you're adopted and you want to find people who are genetically related to you. So you opt in and you say like, yes, I want to be part of sharing, like allow people who have similar genetic information as me to discover me and to get some information about me and to get maybe some of my family tree or maybe my name. I don't actually know all the information that was included. And so basically you're opening up information about you to be shared with people you don't know. So based on those 14,000 accounts that had bad passwords, bad actors were able to log into those and then use the family sharing to access all these other accounts. So for example, maybe I don't have a bad password, but my like half brother that I don't know exists does. A bad actor would be able to log into his account and get information about me. And so that's how so many people had their accounts, their account information, some genetic information, some family information leaked through 23andMe, regardless of like how good their passwords were or not. Yeah.
May I?
Yeah, of course.
So, like, again, I think privacy is so contextual that, again, like, this is genetic data, but location data is, again, based on the context and the scale, the continuity of the data points can reveal much more than what it seems to be. Like, not your genetic information, but your religion information. Are you visiting a cancer center? Are you going to a mosque or a church? Etc. So, one breach I remembered while you were mentioning this is Strava, the running app. I don't know if you recall that, but there was...
Yes, I do.
As I recall, please correct me if I had the details wrong, but they published a data set, a heat map of where the runners are, and they claimed it to be anonymized. But there was a data linkage attack, either by academia or some bad actors, that they have figured out that certain US military bases and military service people running in near those military facilities, their location information and the undercover facilities were leaked, etc. Again, Kim, are you here? Yeah, please go on. Please go on.
Yeah, I wanted to add on the Strava example because, it turned out to not be sufficiently identified because it was such an aggregated data set that you could still not single out, but find big groups of people somewhere where they are not supposed to be. But in addition to that, another Strava example of a privacy problem is that even though you set your privacy perimeter saying I'm gonna hide the start and the end point of my run or my bike ride, because of triangulation attacks. If you only have a couple of runs, you can still easily pinpoint the exact location where a person every time starts and stops, because based on that perimeter, there's only a couple of streets available, so you can easily kind of triangulate exact location. And I think that's very similar to the genetic example of 23andMe. Even if you would de-identify stuff, there's so much information there that you can use to choose to infer additional stuff from, that it's, I guess, almost impossible to have both functionality and strong privacy proofs. So maybe a question to Rebecca is how, I mean, there's a bunch of things that they could have done, like making multi-factor authentication mandatory or having other controls in place. But on the data level, on the access control level, what would have been good?
You mean for Uber, right? Not for Strava?
Oh, and the 20, yeah, well, that's,
I mean, for 23andMe.
For 23andMe, yeah, because, as Mert said, it's very contextual how to solve it, and the more information you have, the trickier. So you think it could be completely avoided?
Rebecca, before you answer, I need like 1 minute as a village mayor. As Kim, thank you so much for the inputs. Even while you're driving, you're sharing your wisdom all the way from Belgium, and we appreciated it here in Privacy Village. I really liked.
Well, that's the problem. It's once I start talking about privacy, it's hard to shut me up. But
that's why I love you. That's why we love you as Privacy Village. But your analogy, like you mentioned the privacy parameters, I really liked it, and we can use the same analogy as like the Tor onion network, right? Because you have the same privacy problem there. If you know the exit node, the intro node, but however scrambled that IP address within the Tor network, if you know the timing, you can identify that person, right? Like, because like you said, even if you mask, obfuscate the start and the end of the runs, right? That's why the end node and the intro node of Tor network sparked. Just a food for thought. But now I need to become a game master. Kim Woods, everyone, is the creator of Linden Privacy Threat Modeling. So based on the 23andMe, what was the privacy threat that has occurred? Is it linkability attack or identifiability attack or both? Winners, the first in the chat wins 20 experience to their faction. Go, you have 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Come on, who's gonna be winner? Snowball effect, I'm not seeing anything new. Identifiability, at least you tried. Both, alright. Kim, which one would it be? You'll be the jury as the creator of the framework, please.
Yeah, damn it, when you asked the question, I was thinking that's a hard one. Also wanna state that the classification is less important than actually finding the threat, whether we call it linkability or identifiability. I would say it's inference that could lead to identifiability. So linking that could lead to identifying.
Kübrajin, you just win your faction 20 XP. Reach out to me after the event, so I'll allocate your points from the Catalyst platform. So thank you so much, Kim. Rebecca, the stage is yours. Sorry to hijack the session. As the game master, I needed to. Do you remember the question even? Because it's been a while.
I actually want to just respond to a couple points that you two made, and one was with the Strava use case. One thing I really appreciated about that, when they realized they had released the information on these secret military bases, the CEO made a heartfelt apology. And that's not something that you see in the rest of these examples that I'm giving. And just for me, that kind of matters, right? It doesn't necessarily change the actual harm or which threat it was, but it creates a different feeling to me. That the CEO is I acknowledge that this sucks, and that's not the way we want to be, as opposed to oh, it's the user user sharing. So like in this case, like I want to be able to share information with my families. There are things that you can put into place. Like always think about these options if you have user to user sharing. Like Google Calendar has user to user sharing, right? Like I can share my calendar with other people. So you have to be really clear about the opt-in. Like what people have to understand what they're doing when they click yes, I want to share this with other people. You have to give people the ability to revoke, limit, or monitor access. So like people in 23andMe should have been able to see like, oh, there's 2,000 family members that can get my genetic information and I want to change it. I want to turn it off. I don't know if they had those controls or not. My guess is no, but I don't know, right? Like, but you can always design this when you're designing user to user sharing. Apply rate limiting. So is there something that you think is reasonable? Like, is it weird if suddenly 8,000 users can get access to that one person's genetic information? Or is it weird if one user is suddenly within 1 minute requesting access to 8,000 other family members, right? Like pay attention, like what are reasonable numbers, and like cut people off if it doesn't seem reasonable. Yeah, and then just some of the classic monitoring for fraud and abuse and things that don't look like humans, right? Like you apply this to your company data, you should also be applying it to user sharing features. So yes, I think I mentioned classic security measures. So detect and monitor abuse, look for IP anomalies or like weird people coming from weird places that they don't normally come from. Like all of my family members maybe are in America, and then suddenly like there's like 1,000 requests for my information from wherever, like not America. It looks weird, right? So it just looks weird. It's an anomaly. Monitor those login attempts and rate limit. I did not really like the legal advice or whatever it was that 23andMe took to come out and say like, oh, it's the fault of the users. Not a big fan. So for me, like how companies are responding to these things matters. And that's my opinion. You can feel differently about it. But like, it matters to me. All right. So third use case, let's talk about Slack.
Rebecca,
Yeah.
one sentence commentary to your last input. It matters to me as well because I think it's a great display of the culture, the privacy culture. Is the C-level are aware of this and owning the problem, or standing back in the shadows, making the policy teams, legal teams, marketing folks draft the announcement. So I 100% agree with you on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's talk about Slack. And Slack's, yeah, this is kind of maybe the least harmful of all of them. What happened in April 2024? Someone read their privacy policy. Like, how is this a failure? Well, let me tell you, they had some things in the privacy policy that weren't beloved. So what's the context? What was happening in April 2024? In this case, there wasn't like a lot of weird, violent political things, but we should keep in mind that ChatGPT was fairly new. It had only been released about 5 months ago. And like we are still grappling with generative AI and large language models and what they mean, even more so in April of 2024. Like still like a lot of questions, a lot of fears. So just keep like generative AI still kind of new. What does it mean in mind? So someone read the privacy policy and then they went to Hacker News and they complained. And what they found when they read the privacy policy, that Slack was training their AI on customer data. And pardon my French, the shit hit the fan, right? Like a lot of the people who read Hacker News were pretty upset with this. It made it to several media outlets, maybe a little more in like tech media than in like, I don't think it was in the New York Times, but it was covered to some degree. It was showing up. And what was one of the problems? Well, so not only did the privacy policy say that Slack had could train their AI on the customer chats, right? So like, but here's part of the problem. It's like, yeah, we'll take your chats, which most people consider to be like having a lot of like personal information, or they weren't expecting it to go into AI models.
Or trade secrets even. like internal comms. Yeah.
Trade secrets, like it, and it felt a little bit hidden, like a little bit, oh, now you're doing this, but you never told us. And then to make it worse, if you didn't want to do it, the way to opt out was your Slack group manager had to send an email to Slack. So there's no automated way to opt out. I personally could not opt out. Like if I were working for a company, it would have to be the group manager for my company's Slack that sent the email. So there's just like a lot of things.
That's
And
definitely a dark pattern. Definition of dark pattern is like it's not easy to withdraw consent, revoke consent, then giving it and making extra steps. That's like
Dark patterns in general?
not like
or-
this specific example, right? I would call it not like just
Yeah, yeah,
non-compliant consent, but it's like a dark pattern because you're making extra steps to revoke the consent while it's one click to give it, kind of. Right, Rebecca?
Yeah,
That's the deal.
it's there's this imbalance between consent. Well, it should have been opt-in in the first place, right?
It should.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
and then there were no like easy controls to opt out. Yeah. So people complained about that too. And Slack was actually quite surprised by this response. And they pointed to some of their security blogs where they had, like, in a sort of technical way, described the work they were doing and how they were trying to be really careful with customer data. And so if you go into those like security blogs, they had communicated that although they were using paid generative AI models, such as, I'm not actually sure if it was ChatGPT, but such as ChatGPT, but they weren't training those big models with the Slack chats. What they were actually doing is making different models that were more like small language models or maybe just like emoji recommendations. And those, their own like homemade machine learning models would then have some of the chat data.
There-
Right. So
Rebecca,
yeah.
I'm so sorry
Uh-huh.
again to interrupt, but until ChatGPT 3 or 2, they were like releasing this like transparency data sheets around what data sets they used, etc. But after 3 or so, they started not releasing these reports on the training data of OpenAI large language models. And that's the conversations when the shadow libraries, etc. and all these like copyright issues, they started devouring like YouTube videos, like they again hit the news, etc.
That to train our models. The security blogs were much more specific, and they were saying like, we've thought about this carefully. We're going to use it for like our small models, but not for generative models. And they kind of did make a distinction there. So that's why they sort were surprised that people were reacting poorly to this. And so like the privacy policy was explaining what it could do, but not what it was actually doing. And I think it maybe didn't like fully address people's concern that like maybe they didn't want their chats used to train any model. Like maybe this distinction between, is it a generative AI model that Slack is buying, or is it one they're building themselves? Maybe that's not what was important to the user. Like, I don't know, but like the privacy policy was a little bit vague here. So instead of asking people to respond to this question, I'm going to go ahead and give you what I think are the answers, like what are the main causes of this incident. So yeah, the privacy policy was written in legalese, saying what it could do, not, as clear and defined as the security blog, but the security blog then was rather technical, right? So like, I don't know which one is better. I'm not sure they totally understand what users cared about, like making this distinction between generative AI and the small models. And obviously the opt-out was not usable. It's a dark pattern, as we already mentioned. So these are things you can keep in mind if you're looking at these kinds of programs and you're like trying to figure out how to build the privacy features in your company and trying to make decisions about training data. Talk about pets, and this is like specifically targeted to compliance, legal, and privacy program management professionals who keep hearing this word, like, or this term, this acronym. What does it mean? Which ones do I care about? So trying to give you an overview without getting too technical of when to use which. And it is absolutely relevant to AI, absolutely relevant to machine learning. And then the other talk is quite relevant to what we were just talking about, like understanding what your users want when it comes to responsible AI. Like, how do you actually find out which elements of responsible AI your users, your customers care responsible AI products? Those are the next two talks, but I said it in reverse order. I think we're doing the user studies on responsible AI.
Let it be a surprise, a twist, if we're wrong, for the villagers. Guys,
Awesome.
would love to have a chat, and that's my networking for you. And Rebecca, thank you so much for everything once more. And see everyone this Friday on the faction networking sessions, the last gamification of our first event at this great hall is figure out if Rebecca is gonna choose today in the Slack channel the AI Apocalypse or AI Fundamentalist faction. Which one will Rebecca choose? The winners right now, write it on here, chat, guess it. I will watch this video and give the allocated experience points to those winners. 5 XP per winner to their respective factions. Rebecca choose, like, there's this backstory lore behind the festival.
Yeah. But what are the two options?
The red team or the blue team, the AI Apocalypse team, which a nihilist, more strict regulation type of faction, and the other one is more innovation and transhumanism kind of fundamentalist, the blue team. Which one will Rebecca choose?
I'm gonna go for the second one. Yeah,
The blue
second
one. The blue one. All right. Rebecca has the answer, so we're gonna see which faction channel she's gonna write on. That's how you choose, and the Catalyst system then tags you as the faction member, Rebecca, by the way. If you missed that on the onboarding email, that was it. It's our last minute, so thank you so much, everyone. See you Friday, and the next 6 weeks, we're gonna be doing the same thing we did today. So hopefully, if that is of interest to you, come meet with these world-renowned privacy heroes of mine and friends of Privacy Village. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Rebecca.
guys.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.